The universe was old. It had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. It had watched empires burn and stars die. And in all that time, across all those countless worlds, one truth had never changed. The strong laughed at the weak, and today, the weak was humanity. The Galactic Council Chamber was enormous. It floated in deep space, far from any sun, a giant ring of metal and glass that had been built 500 years ago by the 5 greatest powers in the known galaxy. The Vorath, tall and blue-skinned, with 4 arms and eyes like silver coins. The Dreth, heavy and slow-moving with thick stone-gray skin and voices like rolling thunder. The Sin, small and fast with 6 fingers on each hand and minds that could calculate faster than any computer. The Keth, ancient and proud, wrapped in long dark robes, their faces hidden behind golden masks. And the Murok, the largest of them all, giants with red scales and teeth like broken glass. These 5 races controlled most of the known galaxy. They had navies, they had weapons, they had colonies on hundreds of worlds. They were powerful, and they knew it. Today was a special day. Today was the Grand Fleet Showcase. Every 5 years, the 5 great powers gathered here to show off their newest and most powerful warships. It was tradition. It was pride. It was also, if anyone was being honest, a very expensive way to threaten each other without actually starting a war. The Vorath ambassador, Lord Val, stood at the head of the great table. He smiled with all 4 of his arms spread wide. "Welcome, friends," he said, and the word friends sounded like something he did not quite mean. "Let us begin." One by one, the great empires presented their fleets on the massive holographic screen at the center of the chamber. The Vorath went first. Their ships were long and sharp like needles made of dark metal, each one bristling with energy weapons and shielded by 3 layers of force fields. "The Vorath Armada now has 12,000 active warships," Lord Vale announced proudly, each one capable of destroying a moon in under 4 minutes. The room was quiet for a moment. Then the other ambassadors nodded slowly, with the kind of respect that is really just hidden fear. The Dreth went next. Their ships were different. They were not fast or pretty, but they were massive, enormous, floating fortresses, made of an almost indestructible alloy, found only on their homeworld. "The Dreth Iron Fleet," rumbled Ambassador Gore, slamming his heavy fist on the table with pride, "cannot be destroyed by any weapon currently known to this council." He paused and looked around the room slowly. "We have tested this." No one asked how they tested it. No one wanted to know. The Sin were third. Their ships were small, but their technology was breathtaking. Tiny vessels that could fold space around themselves, appearing and disappearing faster than the eye could follow. "Speed is the greatest weapon," said the Sin representative, a young female named Essie, her 6 fingers moving rapidly over her datapad. "Our ships can strike and vanish before any enemy even knows we are there." She smiled, small and sharp. "We have never lost a battle." The Keth spoke next, slowly and with great ceremony. Their fleet was old, older than the council itself, but it had been upgraded over centuries, with technology that no one else fully understood. "The Keth have guarded this galaxy since before your civilizations learned to write," said the Keth elder in a dry, whispering voice. "Our weapons are not meant to impress." A long pause. "They are meant to end things." The temperature in the room seemed to drop a little. Finally, the Mirak presented. Their ships were simply the biggest, not the fastest, not the most advanced, but enormous, like flying cities made of red metal. Ambassador Roca stood up to his full height of nearly 3 meters and grinned with all of his many teeth. "The Mirak Crusher fleet has 340 capital ships," he said in his deep, grinding voice. "Each one larger than your biggest station." He looked around the table, still grinning. "Size matters, friends." The room filled with conversation, numbers being compared, strengths being measured, old rivalries silently bubbling under polite words. It was all going exactly as it always did. And then someone noticed the 6th chair. It had always been empty at these meetings. A joke, really. A formality. 3 years ago, the council had sent a membership invitation to the newest spacefaring species in the region. A small, short-lived, completely unremarkable species from a single star system, with only one inhabited world. They were called humans. The invitation had been sent mostly because the rules of the council required it. No one actually expected them to come. No one had even bothered to learn much about them. They were new. They were primitive by galactic standards. And they had only had faster-than-light travel for about 80 years. 80 years. The Keith had been flying between stars for 6,000. So when the council's outer sensor operator sent a message saying that a human ship had actually arrived and was requesting permission to dock, there was a moment of total silence. And then Lord Vile laughed. It was a real laugh, bright and surprised. "They actually came," he said, shaking his silver head slowly. Ambassador Gore of the Dreth made a sound deep in his chest that might have been a chuckle. Even the Keth Elder's golden mask seemed to shift slightly, as if hiding a smile. "Let them in," said Roka of the Murak, waving one massive hand. "It will be entertaining." The ship that docked was small. Not small for a human ship, small by any standard. It was called the Uns Resolute, a diplomatic, which meant it was unarmed, unarmored, and built mostly for comfort rather than combat. It looked, compared to the warships of the 5 great powers, like a small gray pebble sitting next to 5 mountains. The human ambassador walked into the council chamber alone. No guards, no assistants, no entourage. Just one human. He was not tall, not particularly large, not dressed in armor or covered in weapons. He wore a simple dark uniform, with a small blue and white flag on his left shoulder. He looked around the chamber once, slowly and calmly, his brown eyes taking everything in. Then he walked to the 6th chair and sat down. "Captain Leon Hayes," he said in a clear and steady voice. "United Nations of Earth Diplomatic Division. Thank you for having me." There was a pause. Lord Vale recovered first. "Welcome, Captain Hayes," he said with a smile that was not entirely kind. "We were just finishing our fleet presentations." He gestured to the holographic screen which still showed the Murak Crusher fleet in all its enormous, terrifying detail. "Perhaps you would like to present yours as well." The other ambassadors looked at each other. Some were already smiling. Leon Hayes looked at the screen for a moment. He looked at the 12,000 Vorath needle ships. He looked at the indestructible Dreth fortresses. He looked at the invisible Sin-Strike craft, the ancient terrible weapons of the Keth, and the city-sized giants of the Morat. He looked at all of it very calmly for about 5 seconds. Then he looked back at Lord Vile, and he smiled. It was a quiet smile, not nervous, not embarrassed, not impressed, just quiet. "Our fleet," he said. "We didn't think we needed to bring it." He paused, just for a single breath. "Yet." The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Yet, such a small word, and yet it sat there in the silence, and did not go away. Lord Vile kept his smile, but something behind his silver eyes shifted just slightly. Roka stopped grinning for just a moment, before forcing it back. Even Essie of the Sin, who calculated everything, found herself running that one small word through her mind again, "Yet." And then, before anyone could speak again, the council chamber's alert system gave a single sharp sound. Every head turned. The senior sensor operator's voice came through the speakers, careful and confused. "Council, we are receiving an anomalous reading from the outer perimeter." A pause. Something large was detected at the edge of sensor range. Another pause. Longer this time. "We are unable to identify it. It is not on any known record." The holographic screen flickered. The proud images of 5 great fleets disappeared for just a moment, replaced by a single sensor image from the outer dark. It was black and unclear and full of static. But in the center of all that dark and noise, something moved, something enormous. And then the image was gone, and the static cleared, and the screen went blank. The council chamber was completely silent. Leon Hayes had not moved. He sat in his chair with his hands folded on the table in front of him, still calm, still quiet, still smiling that same small, unreadable smile. No one left now. The silence in the council chamber lasted a long time. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. 5 of the most powerful ambassadors in the known galaxy sat in their chairs and stared at a blank screen. A screen that just moments ago had shown something moving in the dark, something that none of their sensors could identify, something that was not on any record in the entire galactic database. Lord Vale of the Vorath was the first to find his voice. He turned to his senior technical officer standing near the wall and spoke in a low, tight tone. Run it again. The officer nodded quickly and pulled up the sensor data. The screen flickered. The same dark image appeared. The same static. The same enormous shape moving slowly through the black at the very edge of their detection range. And then it was gone again, just like before. What is the size estimate? Lord Vale asked. The officer hesitated. That hesitation alone made several ambassadors shift in their seats. Technical officers of the Vorath did not hesitate. They were trained not to. We cannot get an accurate reading, my lord, the officer finally said. The object is producing some kind of interference that is affecting all long-range sensors. All sensors, Lord Vale repeated slowly. Yes, my lord. Cross all frequencies. Yes, my lord. Lord Vale was quiet for a moment. That is not possible, he said. But his voice did not sound like he fully believed that anymore. Ambassador Gore of the Dreth leaned forward in his heavy chair, the metal groaning under his weight. It is a natural object, he said firmly. A rogue planet, perhaps, or a dense asteroid cluster causing sensor interference. He said it with great confidence, the way the Dreth said most things. But Gore was smart enough to know that rogue planets did not move the way that Shape had moved. Asteroids did not change direction. Essie of the Sin was already working. Her 6 fingers moved across her datapad at incredible speed, pulling numbers, running calculations, cross-referencing every known natural and artificial phenomenon in the Sin scientific database. The Sin were the greatest scientific minds in the galaxy. If anyone could identify it, it was her. The others watched her work, waiting. After nearly 2 full minutes, which was an extremely long time for a Sin, she stopped. She looked at her screen. Then she looked up. I have no match, she said quietly. 3 words, but from a Sin scientist, those 3 words meant more than a long speech from anyone else. The Keth Elder did not look at the screen. He had not looked at it since the image appeared. He sat very still in his long dark robes, his golden mask facing forward, his ancient hands folded in his lap. The Keth long-range network detected it as well, he said in his dry whisper. 4 minutes before your sensors picked it up. The room went very quiet again. Keth long-range network was the oldest and most sensitive sensor system in the galaxy. If they had detected it 4 minutes earlier and said nothing, it meant they had been trying to identify it themselves and had failed. Why did you not inform the council immediately? Lord Vile asked, and there was an edge in his voice. Because we wanted to know what it was before we spoke, the Keth Elder said simply. Another pause. We still do not know. Roka of the Murak slammed both enormous fists on the table. The table was built to withstand exactly that kind of treatment, but it still shook. Then we send ships, he said loudly. We send scouts. We go out there. We look at it with our own eyes, and we find out what it is. He looked around the table. Simple. Nobody disagreed. Partly because Roka was very large and very loud, but also because nobody had a better idea. Each of the 5 powers agreed to send 2 scout ships each, 10 ships total. Fast, well-armed, equipped with the best sensors available. They would fan out and approach the anomaly from different angles to get a complete picture. The mission was simple. Go out, identify the object, report back. It should have taken 40 minutes. The first report came back in 20. It was from a Vorath scout ship designation V7. The message was short. We have visual contact. Object is artificial. Repeat. Object is artificial. Size is price. We are having trouble with our instruments. We are going closer for a better face. The message ended. Not with a sign-off, not with a technical problem notification. It simply ended mid-sentence. Everyone in the chamber looked at Lord Vile. He was staring at the communication screen with his 4 hands very still. Hail them, he said. His officer tried. No response. Again, nothing. Try the second Vorath scout. Silence. Over the next 18 minutes, 7 of the 10 scout ships stopped communicating, not all at once, one by one. Each one getting closer to the anomaly before going quiet. The last 3 ships turned around and ran. They came back to the council station at maximum speed. The pilots were pulled from their cockpits and brought to the chamber immediately. They were not injured, but they were very pale, and none of them could clearly explain what they had seen. One Dreth pilot, a veteran of 3 wars, sat in his chair and kept looking at his own hands. It was big, he said, just that, over and over. It was big. The council chamber was not a quiet place by nature. 5 different alien species with 5 different languages, 5 different agendas, 5 different fears. It was usually loud, but right now, it was the quietest place in the galaxy. And in the middle of all that quiet, Captain Leon Hayes of Earth was still sitting in his chair, still calm, still with his hands folded on the table. He had not spoken since his 2-word answer about the human fleet. He had watched the sensor images. He had listened to the scout reports. He had watched the pilots be brought in. He had not changed his expression once. Ambassador Gore turned to him. The heavy Dreth ambassador, who was afraid of almost nothing, turned to the small human in the plain dark uniform and asked the question that was in every mind in the room. "Human," he said, in his deep rolling voice, "is this your doing?" Leon looked at him, not quickly, not nervously. He turned his head at a normal, unhurried pace and met Gore's eyes and said nothing for 3 full seconds. Those 3 seconds felt very long. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small silver communication device on the table in front of him. He pressed a single button. The device lit up blue, and a voice came out of it. A calm female voice, clear and professional. "This is Earth Command. Transmission to Ambassador Hayes. Priority channel. Authentication confirmed." A short pause. "Captain, the fleet is ready." Another pause. "Awaiting your orders." The device went quiet. The blue light faded. Leon picked it up and put it back in his pocket. He looked around the table once, meeting each ambassador's eyes in turn. Vael, Gore, Essie, the Kenneth Elder, Roka. Then he folded his hands on the table again and waited. Nobody spoke for a very long time. Essie was the one who finally broke the silence. She was a scientist, and scientists needed answers. "How large is your fleet, Captain Hayes?" she asked carefully. Leon considered the question. "Large enough," he said. "For what?" she pressed. He smiled again. That same quiet, unreadable smile. "For whatever is necessary." Lord Vale stood up slowly. He was trying very hard to look like a person who was not concerned. He was not entirely succeeding. "This council will take a short recess," he announced in his most formal voice. "We will resume in 1 hour." The ambassadors began to move, gathering their advisors, speaking in low voices, moving toward private communication rooms to contact their home governments. There was a tension in the room that had not been there an hour ago. The easy confidence was gone. The comfortable mockery was gone. In its place was something unfamiliar to all 5 of them: uncertainty. Leon Hayes did not move from his chair. He had nowhere to go. He was alone. One human in a station full of 5 alien species, each one representing a civilization far older and larger than his own. He sat quietly and waited. And while he waited, he glanced once at the large display screen on the far wall, the screen that showed a live feed of the space outside the station. The stars were clear and still, beautiful, peaceful. And then, just for a moment, just for 3 or 4 seconds, the stars on one side of the screen were blocked. Not by a planet, not by a ship the council knew about, by a shadow. A shadow so large it covered 100 stars at once. And then it was gone. Leon looked at the screen. He nodded once, very slightly, to himself. Then he looked back at the table and waited for the council to return. He did not look worried. He did not look nervous. He looked like a man who already knew exactly how the story was going to end. The recess lasted 40 minutes, not 1 hour. Nobody said why it was shorter. Nobody needed to. Every ambassador had spent those 40 minutes on private channels with their home governments, emergency calls, urgent transmissions, classified briefings. And every single home government had said the same thing in different words. Find out what the humans have. Find out now. When they came back to the table, something had changed. It was not obvious at first. They still sat in their same chairs. They still wore their same expressions of power and authority. But Leon Hayes noticed it immediately, the way Lord Vile held his 4 hands closer to his body now, the way Gore's eyes moved to the display screen every few seconds, the way even Roka, the giant Morak who slammed tables and showed his teeth, was sitting just slightly more carefully than before. They were being careful. And powerful people only became careful when they were no longer completely sure they were the most powerful ones in the room. Lord Vile opened the session with a calm and measured voice. "During our recess, this council has discussed the current situation," he said. "We have also discussed the position of humanity within this council. And within this galaxy. He paused and straightened in his chair. And we have reached a decision. Leon watched him quietly. The 5 great powers of this council hereby give humanity a formal notice. Lord Vile continued. His voice was smooth and official, the kind of voice that had delivered many such notices before. You will provide full disclosure of all human military assets, fleet size, weapons technology, and territorial claims within 24 hours. He folded 2 of his 4 hands on the table. Failure to comply will be considered an act of aggression against the Council. He let that sit for a moment. You have 24 hours, Captain Hayes. The room was quiet. All eyes moved to Leon, and something happened that no one in that chamber had seen before. Not in the hour before the recess, not during the fleet presentations, not during any moment of this entire strange day. Leon Hayes stopped smiling. It happened slowly. The quiet, unreadable smile that had sat on his face all day faded. Not into anger, not into fear, not into any expression that any of them could easily read. It simply became still, like a calm surface of water that suddenly has no reflection. He sat like that for a moment, and then he stood up. He was not tall. By the standards of the Marok or the Dreth, he was almost small. But when he stood up in that room, something changed about the space around him. It was hard to explain. It was the way he stood, straight, unhurried, completely without apology, like a person who had nothing to prove and knew it. He looked at Lord Vile, then at Gore, then at Essie, the Cath Elder, and Roka, one by one, taking his time, and then he spoke, not loudly. He did not need to speak loudly. The room was completely silent, and every person in it was listening with their full attention. You want to know about humanity, he said. His voice was low and even, and very clear. I will tell you about humanity. He walked slowly around to the front of the table. Not aggressive, not threatening, just moving to where he could be seen more clearly. 12,000 years ago, humans were living in caves, he began. We had no technology, no medicine, no writing, nothing. We were prey animals. Larger creatures hunted us. Disease killed us. Cold winters killed us. We had no claws, no thick skin, no natural armor, no venom. By every measure of nature, we should not have survived. He paused. But we did. He let that sit for just a moment before continuing. 6,000 years ago, while the Kuth were already sailing between stars, humans were just learning to build cities. He glanced at the Kith Elder. While your people were mapping galaxies, we were learning to write. While you were building fleets, we were building walls around small towns. We were so far behind that the gap between us seemed impossible to close. Another pause. But we closed it anyway. Lord Vial opened his mouth. Leon continued before he could speak. 2,000 years ago, humans were killing each other with metal swords. 1,000 years ago, we were killing each other with guns. 300 years ago, we built weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single moment, and we used them on each other. The room was very still. We fought wars that killed tens of millions of our own people. We had plagues that wiped out entire regions. We had famines, disasters, collapses of entire civilizations. Over and over again, we were knocked down. And over again, we got back up. Not because we are special, not because the universe helped us, but because something in the human mind absolutely refuses to accept that it is finished. He stopped walking and stood still in the center of the room. 80 years ago, we reached the stars. He said it simply. 80 years. In galactic terms, that is not even a single breath. And yet here I stand. He looked around the room one more time. You want to know what humans built while the rest of you were busy measuring each other's fleets and arguing about territory. I will tell you. We built quietly. We watched. We listened. We learned everything we could about every species in this galaxy. Your weapons, your tactics, your strengths, your weaknesses. Not because we wanted to conquer you, but because we learned a very long time ago on our own small planet that the universe is not safe, that peace is not given, that the only way to protect the people you love is to make absolutely sure that nothing in existence wants to start a fight with you. He looked directly at Lord Vol. So that is what we did. We made ourselves into something that nothing in this galaxy would want to fight. We did not do it to show off. We did not do it to threaten anyone. We did it because we are human, and humans do not wait to be protected. Humans become the protection. The silence after he finished speaking was different from the silences before. Those silences had been full of confusion, and calculation, and hidden fear. This silence was something else. It was the silence of 5 ancient civilizations sitting with a thought they had not expected to have today. Roka, of the Morat, was staring at Leon, with an expression that was not quite readable on a Morat face. But it was not mockery. It was something much closer to respect. Essie had stopped typing on her datapad. She was just listening. For Essie, and that was extraordinary. Even the Kuth Elder had shifted slightly, a small movement in those ancient robes, but noticeable. Lord Vol leaned back in his chair slowly. He was a diplomat, and diplomats were trained to control their expressions, but even he could not completely hide the fact that this conversation had not gone the way he planned. He was about to speak when it happened. Every communication device in the room went dead at exactly the same moment. Not just the council systems, every personal device, every private channel, every link to every home world, all of it, gone. Complete silence. Not just in the room, but in the technology around them. For 3 full seconds, the most connected chamber in the galaxy had no signal of any kind going in or out. And then everything came back online at once, and every screen in the room showed the same thing. Not a sensor reading, not a data file, just a single line of text, clean white letters on a black background. It read, "Uns Fleet Command to Council Station. We are in position, awaiting Captain Hayes." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Leon reached into his jacket pocket and looked at his small silver communication device. The blue light was already on. He had not pressed anything. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked up at the 5 ambassadors, and very quietly, very calmly, he said the 7 words that would be repeated across the galaxy for the next 100 years. They are already here. And then every external camera on the council station activated automatically. Every screen showed the view outside, the stars, the dark, the silence of space. And then the dark moved, not in one place, in every direction at once, above the station, below it, to every side. The darkness itself seemed to fold and shift and pull apart, and from behind it, from behind something that had been hiding them perfectly from every sensor and every eye, the human fleet appeared. Not 10 ships, not 100. The screens filled with them. Ship after ship after ship, sliding out of the dark like a tide coming in. Each one different from the last. Some long and sharp like blades, some wide and heavy, like moving fortresses. Some small, and so fast, they were barely visible as anything more than a streak of light. But all of them together, filling the space around the station in every direction, forming a perfect ring. Roka of the Murak, who had laughed the loudest when the small human ship docked that morning, who had shown all his broken glass teeth and waved his massive hand and said, "Let them in, it will be entertaining." Roka stood up from his chair very slowly and looked at the screens and said nothing at all, which for a Murak was perhaps the most frightening thing of all. The screens did not lie. Every external camera on the council station was showing the same thing. In every direction, in every corner of the dark space around them, the human fleet filled the void. Ship after ship after ship, hundreds of them, maybe more. It was difficult to count because they were still appearing, still sliding out of whatever darkness had been hiding them, still taking their positions in the perfect ring that now surrounded the station completely. Lord Veal of the Vorath stood at the window. He had left his chair without realizing it. He stood with 2 of his 4 hands pressed flat against the cold glass and looked out at what was outside. He had been a diplomat for 60 years. He had seen the great fleets of all 5 powers up close. He had stood on the bridge of a Vorath command ship during a live fire exercise and watched 1,200 needle ships fire in perfect formation. He had thought he understood what a fleet looked like. He understood now that he had not. What was outside the station was not just a fleet. It was a statement, a message written in metal and firepower across the entire sky. And the message was very simple. We were always here. You just could not see us. Ambassador Gore of the Dreth had not moved from his chair. He was sitting perfectly still, his thick gray hands flat on the table, his heavy face completely expressionless. The Dreth were warriors. They had fought more wars than any other species in the council. They understood military power the way a sculptor understands stone. And right now, Gore was doing the calculation that every military mind in the galaxy would spend the next decade doing. How long had the humans been building this? How long had they been preparing? How long had they been watching? And how had nobody known? Essie of the Sin had given up pretending to work on her datapad. She sat with it face down on the table and just looked at the screens. The Sin were the greatest scientific and mathematical minds in the known galaxy. They calculated odds and probabilities the way other species breathed. Automatic, constant, effortless. But right now, Essie could not calculate the odds of what she was seeing because she did not have enough information. She did not know the weapons on those ships. She did not know the armor ratings. She did not know the crew sizes, or the power outputs, or the tactical systems. She knew nothing about them. And for a Sin scientist, knowing nothing was the most terrifying place to be. The Keth Elder had not moved at all, had not stood, had not walked to the window, had not looked at his data systems. He sat in his dark robes with his golden mask facing forward, and his ancient hands folded in his lap. But those who knew the Keth well would have noticed something. His hands were not as still as usual. The fingers of his right hand had moved slightly. A tiny adjustment, almost nothing. But for a Keth Elder who had spent centuries learning perfect stillness, it meant everything. It meant he was surprised, genuinely, deeply surprised. And the Keth had not been genuinely surprised by anything in 400 years. Roka of the Morat was still standing, still staring at the screens, his red-scaled hands hanging at his sides, his many teeth no longer visible because his mouth was closed. Roka had 340 capital ships in the Morat Crusher fleet, each one bigger than this station. He had been prouder of that number this morning than he had ever been of anything in his long life. He looked at the screens now and did the simple mathematics that Morat always did. 340 versus whatever was outside this window. He stopped counting at 400, and the ships were still appearing. Nobody spoke. Nobody seemed to know what to say. The 5 most powerful ambassadors in the galaxy stood and sat in various positions of shock, and stared at the evidence of something they had completely failed to see coming. And Captain Leon Hayes stood in the center of the room, calm, patient, waiting. He had known this moment was coming. He had been waiting for it all day. From the moment he walked into this chamber alone in his small, unarmed diplomatic ship, he had known exactly what the end of this day would look like. He had planned it, with Earth Command for 18 months, every detail. The timing of the fleet's arrival, the positioning, the way the cloaking systems would drop all at once so that every camera caught it simultaneously. Every part of it had been designed, not as an attack, but as a message, and now the message had been received. Lord Vile turned away from the window. He walked back to the table slowly and sat down. He was a diplomat, and he fell back on diplomacy the way a drowning person reaches for anything solid. "Captain Hayes," he said, and his voice was carefully controlled. "This council recognizes the significant nature of what you have just demonstrated." A pause. "We would like to formally request an explanation of your intentions." Leon nodded once. "That is a reasonable request," he said. He pulled out his chair and sat down at the table again, just as he had sat all day, hands folded, back straight, expression calm. "Our intentions are simple," he said. "Earth has no interest in conquest. We have no interest in taking your worlds or your resources or your territory. We have no interest in ruling this council or replacing your governments. We are not here to threaten you." He paused. "But we are also never going to be threatened again." He looked around the table. "This morning you invited us here as a joke. You put us in a chair at a table where we were not expected and not respected. You laughed when our ship docked. You asked us where our fleet was, as if the question itself was funny." He said it without anger, just simply, clearly, as a person states facts. "We allowed that because we needed you to understand something that words alone could not explain. So we showed you instead." Gore leaned forward slightly. "You planned this entire day," he said. It was not quite a question. "Yes," Leon said. Gore was quiet for a moment. Then he made the deep rumbling sound that among Dreth indicated something between acknowledgement and respect. "Good planning," he said simply. Coming from a Dreth warrior, it was high praise. Essie picked up her datapad again. Her fingers moved, but more slowly than usual. "The cloaking technology your fleet is using," she said carefully. "It is not in any database we have access to. We have never seen anything that could hide that many ships from the Sin sensor network." She looked at Leon directly. "How long have you had it?" Leon looked at her. "Long enough," he said, as he held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded slowly and wrote something on her pad. The Keith elder spoke then. His dry, whispering voice somehow carried across the whole room. "The humans have been watching this council for many years," he said. It was not a question either. "Yes," Leon said. "And learning from it," the elder continued. "Yes," Leon said again. A very long pause. "We did the same," the Keith elder said quietly, "when we were young." He said the word young, the way someone says a word they have not used in a very long time. It is how civilizations survive. He folded his hands again. "You have done well, human." From the Keth, those 4 words were worth more than a treaty. Roka finally sat back down. His chair creaked under him. He looked at Leon for a long time with his dark eyes. "So what do you want?" he said. Direct, as Morok always were. No diplomacy, no careful words, just the question. Leon unfolded his hands and placed them flat on the table. "A seat at this table," he said. "A real one. Not an invitation sent as a joke. Not a chair where humans are expected to sit quietly and be grateful. A real seat, with real weight and real respect." He looked at Roka, equal to any other. Roka looked back at him, a long, measuring look, the kind of look one soldier gives another when deciding whether to call them worthy. Then he showed his teeth again, but it was different from the morning. It was not mockery. Among the Morok, showing teeth to another warrior meant something specific. It meant acknowledgement. It meant, "You are one of us now, equal." Roka said one word and nodded. One by one the others spoke. Gore said simply, "Agreed." Essie said, "The Shin recognize humanity as a full council member. The data supports no other logical conclusion." The Keith elder bowed his golden mask slightly toward Leon, which among the Keith was the oldest and most serious form of formal recognition. Lord Vol was last. He looked at Leon for a long moment. The silver-eyed Vorath diplomat who had laughed that morning when the little human ship docked, who had smiled his unkind smile and gestured to the screens full of great warships, and asked where the human fleet was. He looked at the human captain sitting across from him, and then Lord Vol did something that those present would talk about for the rest of their lives. He stood up and he bowed. A full, formal Vorath bow. All 4 arms crossed over his chest. The kind of bow the Vorath only gave to those they considered true equals. "Welcome to the Galactic Council, Captain Hayes," he said, truly, and without reservation. Leon looked at him, and the quiet smile came back. He stood, and returned the bow with a simple nod of his own, the human way. Clean and honest and without ceremony. Then he turned to the window one last time and looked out at the fleet. Hundreds of ships holding their positions in perfect silence. No weapons hot, no aggressive posture. Just there, present, unmistakable. He pressed a single button on his silver communicator. The fleet began to move, not toward the station, not toward any of the 5 great powers. They turned slowly together as one single unified force and began to pull back, ship by ship, sliding back into the dark from which they came, until after several minutes the stars were clear again, and the space around the council station looked exactly as it had that morning. Empty, peaceful, still, as if nothing had been there at all. Leon put the communicator back in his pocket and turned to face the council. 5 ambassadors sat watching him with new eyes, not the eyes they had used that morning. Those eyes were gone and would not come back. He sat down in his chair, the 6th chair, the one that had always been empty, the one that had been a joke, and he spoke his final words of the day, in the same quiet, even voice he had used all day. "Now then," he said, "shall we get to work?"